Join me today at the wheel of a very rare beast indeed. It's another 1980s coupe. This time it's from Japan. Yes, it's a Mark II or Generation 2 Honda Prelude. Now, before we begin today's video, I just want to take a moment to mention this incredible Eaglemoss Builder Back to the Future DeLorean kit series, which comes not only with this wonderful binder, but a complete series of in-depth magazines all about the history of the film, the car, the actors, the trivia behind the scenes, and you know I love all that kind of stuff, but not as much as I am loving this kit. This is an astonishing 1/8 scale, which is absolutely vast. The level of detail on this thing is just phenomenal. You build a separate sub-assembly with every issue, everything from the wheels, the Volvo PRV V6 engine, which lived in the back of the DeLorean. Now head to the link in the description below to get your first installment, which includes issues 1 and 2 of the magazine, plus 2 kits to get you started. The first one, rather excitingly, includes your first bit of brushed stainless steel, or metal, bodywork, and you'll also get 50% off your second kit, which includes 4 more magazines and 4 more sections of the kit when you subscribe. Now I'm just loving the insane level of detail you get here. Working suspension and steering, incredible moulding detail on things like the gearbox, which are going to be hidden well inside there. It's complex but huge fun and not difficult. It even comes with a magnetic screwdriver you need and plenty of spare screws, so if you drop a couple it doesn't matter too much. Right, now I'm going to leave you to get on with the video while I carry on building some more of this. I think I'm on to assembling some bodywork. This is a 1983 Generation 2 Honda Prelude EX manual. Isn't it a beautiful thing? Back in the late 1970s, coupes were, as your grandmother would say, all the rage. Everyone had one in their range, and Honda certainly wanted a slice of that action, so they brought out the Generation 1 Prelude. Generation 1 is generally a good place to start with a new series of cars. And that ran from 1978 until 1982, and this, the second generation, came out in 1982 and ran to 1987 with a facelift in 1985. Now something very interesting which makes the Prelude pretty much unique in this sector is that this is not based on anything else. They've not taken a family car or a saloon or a hatchback and developed a coupe out of it. A sedan coupe, I guess you would call this one. The first generation Prelude was an all-new platform, everything completely ground-up design. And then just 4 years later, the Generation 2 came out, and that was a completely new ground-up design as well. It didn't use the old floor pan, it was different, bigger, new. So yeah, that's quite an impressive thing. Now while we're talking about design, let's mention the front end, because there's a few interesting things going on here. First of all, pop-up headlights! Yeah, pop-up headlights for the win! The Generation 2 was the first Prelude to get pop-up headlights. It aided aerodynamics when the lights were off, but obviously it hindered it when you're driving in the dark. And also in terms of aerodynamics, this was a big step on from the Generation 1. It was very, very smooth shaped, very wedgy, very sharp. And you notice how low this bonnet line is. This is a typical Honda thing of a low bonnet line and a big greenhouse glass area. So a great big windscreen, big side windows, and say low bonnet line, low scuttle. So excellent visibility. There are other various little Honda things you notice as you look around the car. For example, the antenna for the aerial sitting above the A-post on the driver's side. The door handles and locks, which are very similar to a lot of other Hondas and, dare I say it, Rovers we've seen in the past. And looking around on the flanks of the car, check out these wheels, these beautiful alloys. You get diamond cut stuff today, you don't very often get gold letters picked out on the wheels. This is absolutely beautiful. Wow, what a thing. And I know for a fact there are wiper nerds out there watching this video right now. Let's count the wipers on this car. 1, 2. 1, 2. One wiper on the front, one wiper on the back. A wiper on the back of a sedan coupe saloon-shaped car. That's pretty cool, huh? But this is also very exciting. I won't wipe it now because the car is dry, but it's pretty grim out today, so I think we'll be having opportunities to use that wiper. Now, I will just quickly say, I wouldn't normally take a car like this 30,000 miles from new and immaculate out on a day as grim as this if I could help it. This car is for sale at Stone Cold Classics, where I am today. You can check the website in the description below and find more details about it, but it went for an MOT this morning, so it's already been out in the rain once today, so I'm kind of thinking
thinking it's okay to do it a second time. It passed without a single advisory, I'm sure you'll be pleased to know. But yeah, check out the link in the description below to find if you want to buy this car, if I haven't already, because it's really nice. Right, let's have a look under the bonnet. Now you will notice I'm opening this bonnet in the wrong direction. Whoops, where's the strut? I thought it might hang on its own, but it doesn't. You need to put a strut in it. This is a front opening bonnet, which actually surprised me. I'd never noticed that about a Prelude before. Now there were 4 engine choices on this car, not that you necessarily got to choose because it depended partly where you were in the world. There was a pair of 1.8s and a pair of 2 litres throughout the range. Both of the 1.8s were 1829cc and 12 valve. One was the E18A and the other was the ES-CV-CC, which is a Honda technology. Then we got on to the 2 litre versions. There are 2 different sizes though. One was the 1955cc A20 12 valve engine, and then we got the big daddy of them all, the B20, which is 1958cc, so 3 cc's more and double overhead camshaft. And you can discern that on from the outside of the car because that one was a slightly larger head on the engine, and so they changed the bonnet a little bit for that one. Interestingly, on the B20, that was Japanese only for the B20 itself, which made 160 horsepower. In Europe and America, that was the B20A and only made 137 horsepower. This car though is a 1.8 CV, as you can see just there, dual carburettor. Now climbing into the Prelude, you do realise that if European and certainly American manufacturers weren't worried about the coming Japanese cars, they really should have been, because they were taking it to them and beating them in terms of either quality, price or both. Even after nearly 40 years, like 37, 38 years, this car still feels exactly as it would have done when it was brand new, and the level of equipment in here is more than impressive. So first of all, I'm sinking into these nice buckety seats, which are, I think we've gone back to some more velour here. This is the interesting half mix of tweed meets velour with corduroy outer sides. In fact, that's velour meets corduroy. Velour-roy? I don't know. The centre section with this nice herringbone pattern is definitely velour, but it's got like a certain tweedy toughness, and the outer section is grooved like corduroy but feels again like velour, so it's a tweed and velour-roy seats, I think we're going to call these. Now I'm going to lift the camera off the tripod and walk you through this rather nice interior, which is loaded with stuff. This may take a while. Okay, let's start on the door for the simple reason if we start there, we won't miss anything. Well, in the top corner, you'll notice we have got internal manual mirror adjusters, which is always a good thing. On the driver's door, always a good thing. Even better, unlike many of its rivals, on the passenger door as well. One up, tick 1 for Honda just there. Then moving into the door card, we've got our elephant hide plastic but moulded to look like leather, and then moulded in stitching. There's lots of attention to detail to make it look like more than it is, if that makes sense. Now, the lower part of the door is also pretend textured plastic leather, a solid metal door pull, which is quite easy to grab your finger into, and these big chunky locks that Japanese cars often had back in this time. Down here in this glossy panel, which is actually fully gloss on the passenger side, what we might call piano black today, but just shiny plastic in this car of age, we've got main on and off for the switch for the windows, regular up and down for the passenger window, and auto window for the driver's side. Also a blanked off switch, or is that a clip of some kind, just randomly here at the front. And not only do we have a ventilation vent down here, which can be adjusted for direction up and down, left and right. So instead of placing it up here on the dashboard, it's out here in the doors. It's quite a good idea because it's actually a little bit closer to the driver, so you get a bit more ventilation off that. In order to keep the window clear, we've got a vent blowing up onto the glass, but not one vent, not 2 vents, but 3 vents down the entire length of the driver's window. So you have no excuse for misted up windows because we have the same or similar vents down along the top of the dash top as well. So we are fully ventilated, and then down in the centre of the dashboard we've got more of the same. So you are no excuses for driving along in a steamed up car in this whatsoever. And while we're talking about the dash top, we again have the plastic moulded fake leather with the fake stitching moulded into it. This is really nice. And the digital clock, which also has the date on it as well, date function, quartz obviously. And as we know, Honda and Rover were tied together in the early 80s, and they do lots of parts and design sharing. And something I'm noticing just here is this. You may be familiar with this area from Rover R8s, ST3s and so on. This is the tea shelf. We have got an exemplary tea shelf here in the Honda. Excellent space for all your picnicking needs. Of course, being a Japanese car, it should be a green tea shelf. I'll move back over here and talk about other things. If we glance in with the door open, these are the vent tubes, or the vent access, which blows into the door. This is quite an extreme amount of ventilation blowing into this door card. Also notice in the back of this area here, not only is the shiny bit of metal for the extra lock someone's added to the car, these little switches, which are the same as on a Rover Coupe. Now, looking at the instrument binnacle, we've got a nice angular, again, Blade Runner-ish, building-ish surround. Now, there is one other warning light area which we don't actually know what it's for. It's a vertical strip of LEDs running top to bottom, the top one being a different colour to the three below, so I'm guessing that's a red one probably. If anyone knows what that's for, we'd be fascinated to find that one out. Over here on the right hand side, we've got three buttons. The top one is an opener closer for the headlights, so that you can perform maintenance presumably on them, or just have them up for whatever reason you like. And below that, roof close open. That can only mean one thing. We have got an electric sunroof. Oh, very cool. Back down here, next to the random switches, we've got an electric switch for the aerial above my head on the right hand side, and the lighter 12-volt socket. And then we have a very, very chunky indeed wiper selection here on the left hand side. Obviously the usual stuff, intermittent low and high, and washers for the front, and then of course we've got the one for the rear as well, complete with wiper on the back. That's an unusual stalk on a coupe which isn't a hatchback. Over on the right hand side, because Japanese early 80s, our indicators are here on the right hand side, along with our light switches to activate our, oh I love that, headlight on warning, our pop-up headlights. Then we have an instrument dimming dial and our fog light switch. Underneath that we've got our fuses and the coin tray, because 80s cars always have a coin tray, and the interesting little instructions on how to use the stalk on the right hand side. So for high, low, pass, left, right. And of course, because this is a Japanese car of the 80s, you have to push the keys to remove them. Now also down here on the right hand side of the driver, familiar to anyone who's driven a Honda or Rover from the 80s or 90s, is this boot and fuel door release down here by the driver. Oh, that leads us back actually also to a pretty sizable door pocket. Now moving back, we have got a not too big steering wheel. It's like a hard rubbery plastic material, which does point out in its very centre that it is power steering equipped. And maybe too close to focus. Power steering equipped, only it looks like it's a two-prong wheel, but actually it's a three-prong wheel. This is very Blake 7 Battlestar Galactica influenced, I would say, this particular steering wheel. Very modernistic for the early 80s. We do love a bit of early 80s style though, because it's always just a bit exciting. Over into the centre, below the extensive T-shelf area, we've got the twin air vents we mentioned, and look at this extreme control for all of heating and ventilation. You know where you are with that. It tells you exactly what you're going to be doing with stuff. And below that we have, well, if it's not the original radio, it's certainly in period edition. It's a National auto repeat radio cassette player, medium wave, and is that FM on there? Yes, it is an FM scale there. Mono option as well, of course. If you're listening in medium wave, it may only be mono, so you can flick it onto all the speakers at once. Below which we have got a little ashtray. And to the left of that we've got a flock-lined glove box. Not very big, but in fact just not very big. Now moving back into the centre, interestingly there's no centre console or cubby here underneath the main hanging area of the middle of the dashboard, which when you look at it compared to the transmission tunnel is actually offset to the left. You don't really notice that until you stop and look at it. You think, oh hang on, that's in the middle of the car. Actually no, it isn't. The big gap here then into this transmission tunnel section, which houses a 5-speed manual gearbox, which will be good because it's a Honda. You know that's going to be smooth riding, easy to use. Moving back into manual handbrake, and of course we've got the back seat area. Because this is a coupe, there's not a lot of room in the back, but what we do have though is this little switch just here. If you read that there, trunk through, turn that switch, it means we can put the back seat down, and so we can turn it into a useful practical car. There are only 2 lap belts here in the back of the car, so it's only a 4-seater. But there are little armrests with ashtrays on the left-hand side, armrest and no ashtray on the right-hand side. Not a great deal of knee room, so I'm not going to try and climb in there. But the headroom looks quite respectable. Now here around the back of the car you can really see the angular square styling of this thing, which is very much at odds of its European and American rivals, which were getting very swoopy and curvy. Even if they were more angular and wedgy, things like the Capri and the Manta, for example, were very much more soft-edged than this thing, which is very much three-box coupe look. Apparently we've got different taillights here in Europe than we did to Japan, but this is interesting how this full-width reflector and light bar is now becoming a common thing again. Audi, Porsche, Kia, off the top of my head, are going with this style again now, but with slim LED strips, whereas this is obviously a bit bigger and chunkier, being the 80s style, where chunky squares were very much the graph paper look. Around here at the back we do also of course have the obligatory heavy rubber spoiler, which obviously aided massively with downforce and was vitally important, and we wouldn't have it any other way. Chunky bumpers, little small twin exhaust, and something I really love, and a real original detail. We've got the original Hammonds and Oakwood of Farnborough in Kent number plate, and in the back window another new Honda supplied by Hammonds and Oakwood Garages Limited, Westerham Road, Kent. And you know, this car is a one family owner from new car. It's been with the same husband and wife since it was new all those years ago, and they were clearly keen to keep it, because if you look at the side of the doors, it has got additional deadbolts screwed in at the bottom of the doors, and it was protected by a Radio Shack alarm. Now, fairly typical of cars of this area, certainly Hondas, the only way into the boot is with the key or the pulley tag down by the driver's seat. Once you're in here, the boot goes back quite a long way, but it's quite a shallow boot, so you're going to have to really push things down hard. Not easy if they're struggling. It's got side trim left and right. The jack is under this plastic trim on the side. The spare tyre is underneath the carpet just here. However, there's no trim here on the back edge of the boot, which is curious. You've got plastic covers over the tail lights, so you can access them unscrewing these little knurled nuts, which is far easier way of changing bulbs than anything else. But yeah, no actual overall trim in the centre, which I find curious. Of course, you can also make the boot bigger by turning that little dial just there and flipping the seats down. Single wiper. Now the Prelude Mark II, or Generation 2, went on sale on November 25th, 1982 in Japan. And they found a new way of selling it in Japan. They started a new chain of stores called the Verna stores. The logo was like a red flower to represent trust and the customer and all that kind of thing. And it was where they were going to sell their premium cars. And initially it was based around the Generation 1 Prelude, and later on other more exciting vehicles that they came up with. Now it's interesting to note that most of this car's rivals were actually rear-wheel drive. So things from everyone from Mercedes to Ford to Toyota were doing rear-wheel drive coupes. So throwing a front-wheel drive car into the mix was a bit of a difference. It turned it into more of a Grand Tourer, I guess, rather than an out-and-out sports car. A Gran Turismo, if you're going to be all PlayStation-y about it. Yeah, I didn't think you were indicating where you were going. It wasn't just the driving wheels that separated it, it was the way the thing feels, well, felt and feels today. Unlike the lower end of the market, the Fords, the Vauxhalls, those kind of things, it's got a really refined feel to it. It feels very composed on the road. There's no rattling, no noise, very little wind noise. The whole thing feels incredibly well screwed together, and the road manners and the pliance of the suspension are really, really nice. It's just, you just really feel like you're at the wheel of a really controlled, refined vehicle. But then you get to the higher end stuff, the BMW and the Mercedes coupes, and so things like the E21, later the E30, and the various Mercedes coupes, which had that heavy Germanic feel to them. And this has a build quality to match those, no question, but combined with lightness. So you really are getting the absolute best of all worlds. And unlike the Mercedes, where you have to spec the glass in the windows as an option, In this car, look at it, it's loaded. The only thing really I can think of we don't have would be electric seats and air conditioning. We've got electric sunroof, got electric windows. Yeah, we're pretty much laughing in terms of accessories we would expect at this time on a car. And this particular tactic must have been working, because around the mid-80s, most sports car coupe type things were being dropped by manufacturers. The Manta went, the Capri went. By 1990, there was really almost nothing else on the market that you would count as a sports coupe as you would have considered it 10 years previously. Maybe just the Celica or the Supra were still fighting the fight. But this car, the Prelude, it didn't get dropped in 1987 when this generation finished. It kept going for another 3 generations, till there were 5 generations of Prelude in the end, which is a good number, I would say. And in fact, the Series 2 significantly outsold the Series 1. So perhaps that comfortable Grand Tourer with a hint of sportiness was what the public was really wanting. This particular car is owned by a husband and wife from new. They owned it, they bought it brand new in 1983, and they've only just sold it now. So clearly it was doing something right for them all those years. The controls are immensely light. The pedals feel like nothing under your feet. The power steering is very, very assisted. But there's no hint of wobbliness, no wandering. And although it is perhaps a little lighter than I would like, you just do give it a little tweak with your finger and the wheels follow exactly. There's no play in it. Braking wise, this car is discs all round, vented at the front, not at the back, just solid at the back. Let's just give them a quick stab. Yeah, they're pretty powerful. I wasn't fully locking up because it is damp day to day. ABS was an option on these cars. And Honda, being Honda with a very logical, direct way of looking at things, their acronym for anti-lock brakes is ALB, which makes sense. Why does no one else's acronym for ABS mean anti-lock brakes? It's what, anti-skid braking system? Who wrote that? This really does feel very Honda-like. It's just so practical, so sensible. Everything is laid out where you want it to be. The blowers don't blow in your eyes like some cars do. The gear shift is just fantastic. And interestingly, the hand grab for the passenger is up on the A post, which is actually quite a nice place to be, because sitting like that with your hand above your head isn't very comfortable. But out in the front, that's not so bad. Now, although this is a carburetted car rather than fuel injection, it is an auto choke, so no messing around looking for the choke on the dashboard, and it does fire up really instantly, just like a fuel injected car would do. I've yet to see these 4 LEDs on the dashboard light up at any time, so I don't know what they're for. I'm still mystified by that, unfortunately. Everything else on the dashboard is really clear and legible. The speedometer is huge, and in front of your rev counter likewise. I really like these under the dashboard warning lights that give it a bit more of a, like I said earlier, Battlestar Galactica feel. This steering wheel is so 1980s sci-fi-ish, it's fantastic. And combine those with these interesting looking control stalks, which are just small as they go into the console, but massive oil drums at the end. Obviously we are running with the headlights on today because it's pretty gloomy out. Oh, this car is so nice. It's so easy and intuitive to drive. A lot of these were sold as automatics. It was a choice of a 4-speed auto or a 5-speed manual across the range. Because they were generally bought by maybe a slightly older buyer, more mature perhaps, it appealed to that kind of grown-up person rather than the Capri might have appealed to the younger guy. A lot were sold as autos. Now, I'm not saying that automatics are purely for old people who don't like driving. I am thinking it. But yeah, it's nice to find one with a manual in it. Obviously, being a coupe, the headroom is a little less generous than on the saloon models from Honda, so you're a little bit closer to the top of your head with the ceiling, although because this has got the electric sunroof, that's a little bit closer still. It doesn't feel claustrophobic though, because the glass area is just massive. As I mentioned at the beginning, the scuttle is very low, so you've got a great view over the dashboard down to the front of the car, and even though it's got the big chunky impact bumpers, which I guess was America mandated, you can still see clearly where the front of the vehicle is, especially when the headlights are up and you can see the top of the lamps in your eye line. This mirror does look quite small and a bit 1970s-ish in the way it's on this little stalk just here, and just so small really. Big glass, small rim. That's got a 70s feel around it. Great view out the back of the car. Fairly decent sized rear glass, and obviously that rear wiper. A rear wiper, how cool is that? When they first came on the market, it was initially just 105 horsepower 1.8. Later the 2-litre came on stream, and when they first came to the UK, the initial choices were just the base model with pretty much nothing, or the top end. This is the ES, this is the loaded example. And it does really handle so nicely. Independent suspension all round, coil springs obviously, none of your leaf sprung muck. It just feels like it wants to go around a corner. We'll chuck around this roundabout a little quicker. It may well be a GT more than a sports car, but it does feel like you can push it on quite happily. It feels so planted and so controlled, it's brilliant. Even as it bottoms out on a bump, it's just in control all the time. Well, thank you for joining me today at the wheel of this really mint Honda. This has been absolutely fantastic. I've driven other Preludes of other generations. I've never driven a Gen 2 before, so this was quite interesting. It's amazing how well it stands up to the test of time. It really is a great car. If you've enjoyed this, please, as always, hit like and subscribe. If we can get to 50,000 subscribers by Easter, I will be over the moon. Join me again next week when we're driving something completely different. And that roundabout really upset the Capri and the Manta. No such problems in the Honda.